Hello, and welcome to the Artificial Podcast, with your host Nick Myers.
Artificial
intelligence,
voice recognition, machine learning,
robotics,
actionable analytics.
It is Nick's goal to help everyone understand how AI and voice technology are reshaping our lives both personally and within organizations. Your glimpse into the growing world of AI and voice first starts now.
Nick Myers.
Nick Myers. Nick Myers.
Nick Myers.
Welcome to the Artificial Podcast. My name is Nick Myers, and I am here to help break down topics in emerging technology, artificial intelligence, and voice assistant tech to help everyone understand how these technologies are impacting our lives both personally and within our organizations. The Artificial Podcast is brought to you by Red Fox AI. Red Fox AI helps give brands a voice by leveraging the power of AI and voice assistant technologies like Alexa and Google Assistant. If you or your organization is interested in sponsoring an episode, please send an email to the Artificial Podcast at redfox-ai.com. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or anywhere that you stream podcast episodes. You can also follow the Artificial Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube by searching for the Artificial Podcast. You can join our brand new Facebook group exclusively for listeners of the show, where you can meet other artificial podcasters from around the world who are interested in emerging technology just like you. A link to our Facebook group has been included in the episode notes. Thank you for listening, and now a quick word from our sponsors before we jump into this week's episode. Hey, Brett.
What's up, Nick?
You know, on the Artificial Podcast, we talk a lot about the future of conversational AI and voice assistant technologies, right?
So you mean basically in every episode we do?
All right, wise guy. But seriously, think about it. I don't think we truly realize how quickly voice assistants like Alexa, Google Assistant, Siri, Cortana, and Bixby, just to name a few, have embedded themselves in our daily lives. I mean, the analysts are predicting that in a little more than 3 years, there will likely be 8 billion, yes, billion voice assistant users connected to nearly 2 billion global websites, more than 40 billion connected devices.
Okay, yeah, that's a lot. But what are you trying to get here, basically?
Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is that for numbers like these to truly become a reality, a few things need to happen.
Yeah, like more technology innovations?
Well, yes, but I'm thinking of something more, something even more important. We need to have trust between the users and the technology itself.
Okay, yeah, I'll be honest. Sometimes I daydream about these voice assistants getting smart enough to rise up and take over like Skynet, from Terminator.
Well, I mean, yeah, sure, that could happen, I suppose, but I'm talking about things like trustworthy privacy and trustworthy accessibility and trust that if you're a business, you have full rights to your name and your brand. Have you heard about the Open Voice Network?
No, I haven't. Can you tell me a little bit more about them?
I would love to, Brett. Well, in a nutshell, the Open Voice Network is a non-profit directed fund of the Linux Foundation that is dedicated to making voice assistants worthy of user trust. Members of the Open Voice Network include conversational AI designers, strategists, developers, and other industry professionals from all around the world who are dedicated to paving the way for a future where voice can be trusted and benefits everyone. I'm proud to say that I've been a member since early this year, and it has truly been one of the best decisions I have made since becoming a voice practitioner. And if you're in the industry, I highly encourage you to check it out and join.
Sweet. That sounds cool. So what you're saying is Skynet isn't going to happen?
Oh, Brett.
If you are interested in learning more about the Open Voice Network and how you can get involved, visit www.openvoicenetwork.org or send an email to john.stein@openvoicenetwork.org. The Open Voice Network. Voice assistants worthy of user trust.
Hey there, artificial podcasters. Welcome back to another week and another episode of the Artificial Podcast. This week, our guest is Bobby Bryant, who is the founder and CEO of DOSS. And I had the pleasure of connecting with Bobby a few weeks ago now, but it's interesting because we've been following one another on social for quite some time. And I've only, up until actually chatting with him, seen bits and pieces of what he's working on. But after talking with him and looking more at his vision and what he's working on with DOSS. I mean, we connected right away, and I knew I had to get him on the podcast so we could have a really good discussion. But before I welcome Bobby to the show, let me tell you a bit about Bobby Bryant. Bobby is the CEO of DOSS, a prop tech company that's democratizing the real estate industry via a fair price digital real estate brokerage that's developing a voice-activated intelligent assistant built into a proprietary real estate search and transaction platform. DOSS empowers any buyer, renter, or seller to ask any question about property in the world to get accurate, easy, and instant answers 24/7. Architecturally built on an intelligent interface, consumers are able to access everything that there is to know about a particular property by speaking, texting, or typing their questions into any desktop, smart speaker, and smartphone to search, schedule property tours, digitally submit offers, negotiate price, and much more. Bobby, welcome to the Artificial Podcast. How are you?
Doing great. Thanks for having me. How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, sir. I'm really excited to be able to chat with you here again, just because of, you and I think are on the same page with so many different aspects of voice technology, and specifically getting to learn more about what you're working on with DOSS here is, I think what you're building is going to be a true game changer for not only real estate, but for the voice technology industry in general. So I'm really excited to dive into some things here with you.
Great. I look forward.
Awesome. So to kick things off, what has your career journey been like so far, Bobby? And did some of your past experiences in real estate or other roles that you may have had help lead you to found DOSS and what you're currently working on?
That's a great question. When you start talking about the journey of things, I've been in real estate for 20 years. And by way of education, I used to be a school teacher. And so, when you think about this journey from me starting in real estate and going through the years, learning and having the diverse verticals from mortgage to title to real estate brokerage to real estate school, and how all of that led into DOSS. It's been an interesting journey, and I would almost have to say that DOSS being an intelligent assistant and me having this opportunity via my experience and seeing the IBM Watsons and Series of the world, that's what led me on this journey to where we're at right now, creating an intelligent assistant for the real estate industry.
Right. And real estate is one of those things that, especially as you look at a technology like voice, it's like, where could it even fit into the picture? But what you're working on here with DOSS, I mean, it solves so many problems. I mean, and I think you and I chatted about that a couple of weeks ago, where you're like, all this busy work that realtors have to deal with, and that's passed on by proxy to the client, and all these different things. DOSS is really going to help solve that. So maybe that leads into this next curiosity I have. What is the single biggest problem that you see in the real estate industry today, and really how are you hoping to help solve that with DOSS? Again, I know a bit of a loaded question, but I'm curious.
So, when you look at the real estate industry and you think of all the current platforms via our competitors, they're built on a graphical user interface. They use boxes, pre-filtered boxes, and anytime you hear that something is pre-filtered, then that means it gives a limited output of information. And so the biggest issue with real estate, but when you start talking about us building something like DOSS, it's advantageous, is the fact that there's so much data. And when you're using the graphical user interfaces like Zillow and Realtor.com and the Redfins of the world, there's limitations there of being able to mobilize that information. And what we wanted to do, with a modern day consumer who wants access to information in order to make, in this case, the best decision for for most people, the biggest purchase of their lives.
Right.
How do we better mobilize, and how do we humanize, information for the consumer? And I think that, it's one of those things. It's like, you really didn't know that there was a better version to Blockbuster until Netflix came around, right? You know,
good example.
Right. And so, you know, these platforms are they're working very well, and but we believed, my entire team, that we could actually, very similar to Netflix to Blockbuster, that we could provide a better solution. We could give users and practitioners a better way to get information, accurately, easy, and instantly by leveraging an intelligent assistant via voice.
Yeah, well, and you look at an industry like real estate, right? And forgive me, of course, I'm no expert in real estate, but I can assume, just having family members who are in real estate and other friends, that it's kind of been a stagnant industry, right? Like, of course, when we had the internet boom in the late 90s, early 2000s, of course, we had some of these, websites that connected to MLS come to be, and then they innovated there. But I feel like since then, it's been relatively stagnant. Would you agree with that?
Flagrantly. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. But here's the thing though. And when people start asking that question, because I get asked that by, investors that we talk to, like, why do you think real estate has, gone this long without, being disrupted? And so, but when you think that you have an industry where the average realtor is 54 and the average broker that the realtor works for is in their mid 60s to late 60s.
Yeah.
You think of the average person that becomes a realtor. This is a second, third career move for them. The last thing that they're trying to do when they come to real estate is rock the boat. The biggest thing they want to do, they retire, they're making $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a month. They want to have something to do. They want to make some money. And so they come to real estate, and there's just hadn't been a need or desire for the average age, again, to rock that boat. But you all of a sudden have the universe that dispatches this crazy guy that's stupid enough to believe that he has a chance to do something unique and different, named Bobby Bryant, right? And so
yeah, well, and having had many family members in the industry and friends, for it really is kind of, as an agent, of course, you have a broker that you work with, the different things, but you're essentially running your own mini business, right? Like, you have to do the marketing, you have to do lead gen, you have to do all these little things that are kind of a mini business in a way. And of course, as you and I both know, trying to grow startups right now, you have to wear many different hats, albeit in a bit of a different sense for what we're working on versus, somebody who's trying to grow the real estate business. But there's so many, tiny tasks that you have to do that just consume time. And I remember you telling me that one of your goals with DOSS was to help solve some of those tiny tasks, make it easier, and then you even look at the buyer side or the seller side and the process that they have to go through. And, I've had family members who bought and sold homes, and, from the time that, they get told an offer, they have to sit on it, then they have to go back to the realtor who goes back to the buyer's realtor. And, it's just this web of interconnections that takes up so much time. And is that some things you're trying to solve with DOSS as well, just in this web of processes that exist within real estate?
It is. Our mission statement is simply to develop the best technology to make homeownership in America more affordable. And thank you. And so when you start deep diving into what does that mean? Our objective at DOSS is to live up to the promise of technology, which was primarily two things. What was to save people time and money. And we want to not only create an intelligent assistant that leverages voice to do just that. We want to create a situation to where it can help people search better.
Right.
A search engine, a better do engine, a recommendation engine. See, voice is so much bigger than I think a lot of us really understand.
Yeah.
And surely the consumer or the average business doesn't understand, is that how can we take these intelligent assistants that leverages voice and to be able to truly create an assistant that makes our lives easier, that makes doing things, the nuances, the mundane things that we don't like doing happen at the edge of our voice and an utterance and a request. And that's what we want to accomplish with DOSS for all things real estate.
Yeah, and then maybe, that kind of leads into something else I was going to ask here with how did you decide that you wanted DOSS to be a voice assistant versus just another, software as a service platform or website that could help solve some of these problems, and maybe what appealed to you the most? And you may have just touched on that, but I don't know if you can dive a bit deeper, if there was anything else specific as you were, going through this process of deciding what you wanted DOSS to be.
It all started with trying to make search better. That I'm exhausted with seeing these real estate websites with these long rectangular boxes.
Yes.
That ask us to type in an address, a zip code, a neighborhood, or when we deep dived into the research phase of things, and we said, wow, do you know that the average real estate site has anywhere between 30 and 75 boxes? Who wants to sit there and click that many boxes? Trying to refine and deep dive a search. And it was pain points like that. And then when we took inventory, coming to realize that, wow, the top 5 real estate search engines only display about 40 to 45% of the available data on any given property. That sucks. Okay, cool. So I'm buying a house and I go to these websites. Are these websites only wanting to take me so far, so I'm needing to contact them for additional information? Like, what's the objective here? And what we wanted to do was set that data free, allow the consumer to ask any question about any property in the country the way they want it to ask it, the way they ask questions, to humanize it for them, to make that experience in the words or to steal a part of a Steve Jobs statement. How can I put a realtor in your pocket 24/7?
That's awesome. I love it. Well, and that I think sums up exactly what I just asked, to where, why is voice appealing? And I mean, there it is right there. I mean, the fact that you literally can ask anything for the first time as it relates to, searching for a home you'd want to buy. I would assume even, if you're somebody looking to sell a home, the process to that. And then, of course, on the realtor side too, and democratizing that data more. So, there is more flexibility with some of the different questions and some of the different pieces of information that people want. But like you said, it's boxed into the current, websites as they are now, where they're always trying to guide you to essentially use them as a service versus giving you the full picture. So I think that's brilliant.
And can I add one more thing about that?
Yeah,
question?
Absolutely.
The cool thing about voice is 2 primary things. Number one, it's obviously factual that we speak more words per minute than we type. So that. So number 2 is that when we go to these interfaces, and in this particular case, we talk about a graphical user interface, we have to learn how to use that site.
Right.
We have to end up learning how to engage that site, because we have to click and tap and type into these graphical user interfaces. But the beautiful thing about voice is that we all already know how to ask questions.
Yes. Huge point right there. Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree with you. And that's one of the things I always talk about too. And, I'm encountering a group of folks who, don't even know where to begin when it comes to voice. I'm like, the biggest sell of this technology, in my opinion, is the fact that there is no learning curve, because, most of us, from the age of 2 all the way up until, the day that we pass on, know how to speak and know how to articulate, in whatever native language that we speak. And, for some people, multiple languages. And there is no learning curve to that. And that's why I think we really are sitting on the cusp of a boom here. It's just a matter of when, right?
Exactly.
But no, I agree with you completely. So when we think of voice assistants, most people think of, I guess, let me rephrase. When we think of voice assistants today in 2020, most people think of, Alexa, Google Assistant, or Siri. So for you, what has it been like building your own voice assistant from the ground up? And what have been some of the biggest challenges and successes that you've had along the way?
You know, in a lot of ways, you know, we started this journey and a long time ago, and so it's been a different process for us. You know, for me, when I first saw again the IBM Watson playing the two winningest players in Jeopardy, and then a few months later, Apple introduced the world of Siri. I've been baking on this and incubating this idea for quite a while.
Yeah.
And so we had to wait for the technology to continue to advance on itself, right? And the biggest challenge is interesting enough is what we found out what we had to become, which was AI agnostic. That none of these, you know, blue chip, you know, conglomerates are actually great at everything.
It's true.
You know, yeah. When you are, you know, getting sucked into the echo chamber of things, and you're paying attention to this big group and how everybody is developing here, you have to slow down for a minute and ask yourself, well, why is that? You know, and go through the experiences of each, you know, each conglomerate and their version of an assistant, and you start realizing that they all are developing with an intent. They all are individually developing themselves with an intent.
Absolutely.
And an approach. And the voice industry, voice first, has to understand that fact that Amazon with Alexa, why are they developing Alexa, and what's their intent with it? And then the same thing with Google, and the same thing with IBM Watson. And then what you start, if you're really a student of this game and this vertical of voice, then you start understanding, instead of totally being jaded and blind to the fact that your development will only go as far as the limitations of that conglomerate. And
yes.
Exactly. And so what we learned at DOSS is like, wow, we and everybody loves exclusive. Oh, we want you to exclusively work here. But the thing is exclusively you have limitations. Yep. And so we had to learn that we had to become AI agnostic, and that we do need a solution that's strong at structured data. We need another one that's strong at unstructured data. We need another one that's strong at this, that, or the other. And because when it really comes to the user, they couldn't give a shit about, you know, who is the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain. They just want the response
right
that they want. You know, I want this to do what I asked it to do when I asked it. And so, and the other thing is that we realized in feedback is that privacy is really a real thing. And how do we, as much as possible, create a solution that respects privacy and the fact that we're not going to sell their data.
Right.
And so these you know, I guess you could say company ethics and value props is also important in this vertical that's so new and still to a large degree early. And so I'll say that's kind of been our, you know, our challenges and evolution of really trying to also develop this thing to where it's not overly communicative, it's not overly conversational, that sometimes there just may need to be when somebody's making an utterance where the phone just vibrates and it lets them know that I heard you, or to some degree that it repeats the utterance, but in a very concise way. And in some instances, it may not even need a verbal response at all. It just gives you a visual via the interactive screen. And that's the reason why we're mobile first. In comparison to, I think, a huge problem that the voice first community made was thinking that we were going to jump from an interactive screen to no screen at all voice. And that had to be, respectfully, voice industry, the dumbest idea ever, that you have to transition people. And that was the beauty of Steve Jobs. We need to put on our Steve Jobs hat right now, because this guy mastered product development. And he mastered being able to create this Venn diagram of where people are at today and where I want to take them tomorrow, but I have this shaded overlap of two circles that where I need you to be at right now. And I think that has been the ultimate struggle collectively of the voice industry, is that we haven't quite, figured out that hybrid Venn diagram of how do I take this old way of thinking to a new interface. What's that transition look like? And that's what we've had to really, really make sure that we understood and delivered on at DOSS.
Yeah. No, I all your comments there, Bobby, I know you and I have talked about this, and we're definitely on the same page in so many areas. And I kind of view, the current stage we're at is, where there's land, right? We're on the eastern side trying to get to the western side, but there's a river in between both, right? And you have to hop to the different lily pads to get to the other side. And we're, I think, at still one of the very first lily pads, if you will, in terms of showing people and guiding them to the other side, which ultimately I think the other side is, we have ambient computing and voices and everything, right? But people just aren't even close to thinking like that, right? And I think mobile has definitely been an overlooked aspect of this. And I'll be honest, when I first joined this industry, I thought that way too. I thought that, it's just going to be a jump from smartphone directly to this new interface. No. No learning curve, no nothing, because we all can talk, right? Well, I think now 3 years into it for me specifically, and I think the industry itself, we can kind of see some people being more cognizant of the fact that maybe users need an intermediary. Maybe even enterprise need an intermediary stepping stone to this world of voice activated everything that I think we're all trying to achieve. And that's why I actually think as we head into the next couple of years, this is going to boom more on mobile and voice activated apps than anything else. I think, we've hit the smart speaker stage, warmed everybody up to that, but it's still very hard just to jump from smartphone just to using smart speaker, because the smart speaker is still so limited in many ways that mobile isn't. So if you can layer voice onto mobile and some of the existing stuff, it's a primer to what is to come. And once people get insanely comfortable with that, then is when we can really start trucking towards, this world of voice activated everything. So I think your point about that is absolutely right. And that's something we've been thinking about too at Red Fox is, I think this whole focus on just designing for smart speakers and different things is, it's important, but it's not going to be what's most important over the next couple of years. There's going to be a lot of developments in the smartphone space. And that's what I think is fascinating about what you're working on DOSS too, because that's the mindset you have. It's mobile first. So, I thought those were excellent comments, and I agree with you 100%. So with that being said, how do you plan to position DOSS differently from other voice assistant platforms currently in the market? Will DOSS have its own unique quote unquote personality, tone of voice, et cetera, to differentiate itself, or do you have something else in the works, to as much as you can tell me?
So, that really is I'll say two things here. It is the thing about DOSS that's unique in comparison to your other voice assistants are well-known ones of the Google Homes and Alexas and Siris, is that DOSS isn't trying to be a be-all.
Right.
DOSS is domain specific. And actually that makes it so much easier for us because we could really go deep and wide into that domain without attempting without trying to be a solution or an answer for everybody. And so with that being said, we are trying to not tell you how long a giraffe stays pregnant, or or how many stars are in the universe and the closest star to the Earth. Right. We don't care about that. As a matter of fact, when you ask DOSS that question, it's just simply going to say you may want to ask my cousin Alexa that, right? Because we focus purely on real estate domain type questions. And so that's the biggest difference. But I also believe that for them, that's the biggest downfall. It's the voice industry that should be more specific and domain specific, I believe. Let these guys be generalists.
Yeah.
Let them attempt to answer everything there is to know about everything. But I think the opportunity is in going domain specific. And has been our focus at DOSS. It's all things real estate, from mortgage to insurance to realty to every property, giving every house on the ground in the country a voice. That's our objective.
Well, and for the most part, right, we've seen it in the past with, almost, every successful company is they niche out, they find, their unique path, their unique market, and they just go at it 100%. And I think so far in voice, because, these major platforms entered with the mindset that they were generalists, and I'm not trying to make assumptions, speculate here, but it almost seems because Alexa and Google Assistant and Siri were all general, that same mindset kind of trickled down into the folks who entered the industry, myself included at one point, thinking that, all right, if these platforms are going the general route, then maybe that's the route we should be headed to. But, again, over the past year, I think more than anything, it's been a wake-up call to me and other folks I'm talking to that it's impossible to be general right now. Absolutely impossible.
Exactly.
So I think exactly the direction you're headed with DOSS, focusing just on real estate. That's it. You want your answers as it pertains to real estate using the voice assistant. DOSS is your voice assistant to do so. I think you are, sir, you are on to something really, really incredible here. Just with that mindset alone, because that, I think, is why we're entering this cold winter, as Brian Romley has mentioned before, is because we can't seem to figure out the specifics of this versus the general and trying to appeal to everybody. And that's been the hardest thing for us too, and something that we're actively working on. But I think you going down the real estate path and focusing on that entirely to differentiate yourself from the generalist voice assistants that are currently widely available, I think is going to lead you to untold success. So that's some really interesting thoughts you have to that question.
Yeah, it's interesting enough solving a problem of one particular industry.
Right.
And hopefully I'm not getting ahead of myself here, but when you start talking about the biggest issue that the voice community is having is monetizing it.
Yep.
But when you're taking a general approach and you don't have a use case that you can prove out,
it's hard to monetize.
It's hard to monetize, right? Right. And so, like, I am an expert at this. The reason why I chose real estate is because that is where I'm an expert at. I unequivocally know the real estate industry. I unequivocally see how I can leverage a voice-activated intelligent assistant to improve search, to connect all the dots. And by doing that, that will impact our bottom line. If we do that the right way, it will impact our bottom line. The voice industry has to figure out a domain that they feel like they can impact, because there's a learning curve to understand a domain that you don't know.
Right.
If somebody popped up right now and said, I want to give you $500,000, we want to insert voice into our company, there's a learning curve. Now you have to, you have to sit down with that executive. You have to learn their business, what are their goals, this, that, and the other. But if we just input it into the DNA, if we build it into the DNA of an entity, in other words, bolted on versus built in, if you build it into the DNA of an entity, then now all of a sudden you could really start creating some very rich user experiences.
Yes.
But if it's a bolt-on approach, is that really fixing anything? Is that really going to give potentially the impact that people want and or need to? Because if not, then it is gimmicky. Then it does come off gimmicky at that point. But if you could take an intelligent assistant and actually execute task and search and help that entity or industry solve real problems, now the voice community is gaining traction. Now we're starting to see use cases that are winning, and now we are impacting bottom lines. And now all of a sudden we start seeing an industry that is taking flight.
That is some true wisdom there, Bobby. I love how you brought up it's the difference between, the DNA of an actual industry versus bolting on to just a specific company. And,
Yes.
I think it's not even, I think that has been the model. And even, just being upfront here, that has been our model is, oh, well, we'll just try and, help different enterprises understand Alexa, Google Assistant, voice, and bolt it on to help them solve a problem. But to your point, that makes it gimmicky, because it's like, if it can't function seamlessly within the industry itself, transcending beyond just a single company within an industry, then what are you actually solving, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's some true wisdom there, and I agree with you 100%. The mindset definitely needs to start taking the shift of, how can we create something to fit itself within the DNA of an underlying industry that impacts us, a whole bunch of people, a series of companies, I don't know, but something more than just tacking it on to, as just kind of a, like to your point, a bolt-on approach.
Exactly.
So, you and I have talked before about voice as a service. And again, you're the first person I think I've really been able to have a really good discussion about that with, because, when I entered the industry in 2018, I immediately started looking at, can this be retooled to function like software as a service in a way where you could provide a voice assistant or voice itself as a service? Because as we know, SaaS models are insanely effective, of course, over the last 20 years, and specifically within the last 10. And there's SaaS companies all over the place now. Do you think the voice as a service VAS model will ultimately become the future of the voice technology industry?
I think it has that potential. Yes. But going back to what we just mentioned is that, but I think what has to happen is that the voice industry is going to have to choose domains and verticals that it specializes in. I mean, if you think of the airline industry, like, what's the pain point there? How can I literally have an assistant, and I tell it, hey, I need a flight on Thursday between, 1 and 3 o'clock going out to San Francisco. That's under $600. Like, the airline industry is a multi-trillion probably industry. I hadn't looked at how big that industry is.
Oh, and they would probably want that technology in a heartbeat, right? Because it automates the entire process of searching for and buying a flight.
Totally. And now I don't have to sit here and go scroll through graphical user interface, scroll through a whole bunch of times and flights and this, that, and the other. I could just give my utterance and it shows me everything. And that's what I'm saying. I think there's going to be a Tammy, a virtual assistant, intelligent assistant for the travel industry. I think there's going to be Pam for the restaurant industry. I think what's going to have to happen is the voice industry is going to have to choose a major, right? And decide who is it going to be, right? And stop trying to be this be all to everybody.
Well, at least, folks who are in it or companies that are in it are going to have to choose a major, right? Because I think at this stage of the game, we all can agree that we will enter an ecosystem at some point with,
yes,
dozens, hundreds, even potentially thousands of voice assistants serving different needs within different industries, or you have one for a specific industry, or a company has their own, but it's still within the realm of their industry.
Exactly.
To think that it's going to continue being this ecosystem of just Alexa and Google Assistant and Siri and Bixby, again, these are amazing platforms, but they aren't going. I'm trying to figure out how I want to word this, because I don't want to come across super cynical, but there's going to be way more opportunity beyond what's just currently available.
It is. And I think that when you start designing these intelligent assistants, again, for domain specific task, then it'll go, and then that'll even dictate who you need to use or what combination, like for what we had to experience, that IBM Watson and Google is our two primary vehicles, and for what we are seeking to accomplish with our intelligent assistant DOSS. We're on top of AWS servers. Maybe that counts, but we're
right.
We're gonna integrate into the Alexa smart speaker. Same thing with Google Home. We're gonna do those integrations now. DOSS is gonna be different, in those smart speakers, because when you think of just being mobile and I'm out and about and I'm looking at houses, I'm inside of a house. I want to have my assistant DOSS with me. So if I have a question about this house on the fly, on the go, I could ask that question from that house to the next house I'm about to tour.
Well, it'll become almost like Kleenex, right? Where instead of just a brand name, it turns into the utility of what you're actually doing.
Yes,
you know,
exactly.
And that is, I think, where every brand wants to be, right? Every company wants to be, is you transcend from you're just a brand, but you actually become the utility of what somebody is actually doing.
Exactly. And then the other aspect of that is, you know, you start talking about problems you're solving. You know, if I'm on my DOSS mobile app and then I get home and I put my phone down and now I'm in my house and I want to use, you know, my smart speaker, and then I get to work and now I want to use my desktop. You know, how can I mobilize and transition these conversations to where I don't have to start over just because I changed devices? See, these are some of the problems we're solving because we're going to start engaging different platforms.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to have to start my query over, or now my desktop is dumb because I wasn't talking to it.
Right.
And I was talking to my mobile device. How can we interconnect these different devices? And because I'm logged into my account, it can keep those conversations going as it continues to learn me and what I'm looking for in a home, and or how I'm wanting to purchase items, retail, and home service my home. You know, so how do we keep these conversations going via different devices without having to start over? And that's an issue that smart speakers alone have.
Right. Absolutely. And I think
because it wasn't built for that yet.
Right.
And so we have to think of those things now. And how do we build ourselves now to scale our solution so we won't build ourselves in a corner? That's right. A real thing.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's, you know, been one of the biggest holdbacks for folks from the beginning is, you know, if you have a conversation, say on Alexa, you can't carry that conversation over to Google Assistant, or you can't carry it over to Siri, you can't carry it over, you know, and that creates so much friction for the user that, you know, it almost seems like, man, like where do you even begin to try and, you know, and solve that issue? Now, I know there is some type of interoperability initiative going on now, but there's, you know, I think I heard about that once and there's been no discussion on it since. And again, that's why I like your approach, because going into developing DOSS, you're like, we need to be agnostic to everything, because if we're not, that is insanely limiting. And then to your point, it's very hard to scale that.
I like the very old statement by George Bernard Shaw. The goal of an artist is to create the definitive works that cannot be surpassed.
That's a great quote.
And we have to think of voice as the same way, because each one of us are artists and technicians as we take our empty canvas and we ask ourselves, who is our user? What do they need and want? And how can we build this to fulfill and satisfy that need? The goal of an artist is to create the definitive works that cannot be surpassed. And you have to be AI agnostic if you believe in that quote.
Absolutely. No, and I really like how you linked this aspect of technology to art, because I think a lot of people who work in technology tend to lose sight of that. You know, when we think of a software engineer, when we think of a conversational designer, when we think of some of these different roles that currently exist within voice, artists don't necessarily pop into mind. And I almost think that is not necessarily a good thing, because no matter what you're constructing, especially in something that is so new like voice technology, it can even be applied to AI, blockchain, any of these emerging pieces of technology. In the early days, you are an artist who is actively painting the canvas that is going to become a solid work that is going to stand the test of time. It really is true artistry, especially when you look at some of these complex programs, some of these complex pieces of software, even voice applications that have so many different lines of code, but it's just beautiful in how it functions. I mean, that is art. So I really like how you bridge the gap between that, because I think if more of us started looking at what we're doing as an art form, where we're actively painting a canvas and doing some of these artful things, maybe the thought press will shift a bit. So I think that's some really insightful advice that you gave there, which leads me to this, as we start to wind our conversation down a bit. Startups and emerging technologies like AI and voice seem to be popping up everywhere these days, probably more AI than voice at this point. But what has it been like building your startup in an emerging technology like voice? And what is one piece of advice that you would give someone who is interested in beginning their own startup in one of these technologies, I guess, more from the voice standpoint?
When I started this journey and I first saw, again, IBM Watson and Siri, both in 2011, it was so new. And it was so amazing. It was stratospheric, literally. And as I began to try to find any and everything that I could study that, that these guys were doing, who built that? I'd say, surely, if you are in the voice industry, if you have not read the book called If You Really Want to Change the World, by Henry Kressel and Norman Winarski, then you're missing two geniuses that talked through and gives you an opportunity to be a fly on the wall to understand what their true intent was with Siri.
Mm-hmm.
If you really want to change the world, there's a lot of great authors who've written books over the years recently about voice. That book was profound for me.
That is great to know,
because it put me in a mindset of how we need to develop DOSS and what they were thinking, and actually how the sale of Siri was premature because they didn't really get a chance to finish it before selling it to Apple.
Yeah.
The biggest thing I could think of is really, really deep dive with this opportunity. The objective is to understand how people communicate, not how you communicate. How would people want to be engaged by a computer? This has been around for years, actually, way before IBM and way before Siri. I mean, they've been having talking computers going back to the 50s.
Right.
But the question is, what's our message to the consumer, to our user? What's going to be the approach, and why should they use this development that we all are creating? And it has to be 100 times better than what currently exists. It has to be. But yet at the same time, that's easy to do. The ability to use these technologies that includes voice, it has a phenomenal 5-minute wow factor. But what's going to make me keep wanting to use it?
Yep.
And not divert to turning lights on, playing Michael Jackson Thriller, and setting a timer? We have to get to this point with this awesome technology, to the point to where it becomes a fabric of individuals' lives. It actually makes their lives easier. And that's where our mindset resides with our development. Is how can we create this assistant in a way that it's almost like having a personal assistant for everything at your house, your home, paying your utility bills, everything. The thing that Norman Walensky said in his book was they were creating a do engine. That was the first time I ever heard it. I was like, wow, because we're a lot of times thinking that voice is kind of like a new search.
Yeah.
But what about if we could build these do engines that actually, hey, DOSS, on Thursday, schedule a tour of 1234 Main Street from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock. Like, And it does it like without having to get on all of these mindless phone calls. That's not in our highest and best use of time.
Right.
And so we really have to, I think, take 2 steps back, 3 steps back, and recalibrate how we view this industry, and realize that probably the reason why it hasn't taken off is because of the industry itself. Has a limited perspective, has a echo chamber perspective about the solution that this phenomenal tool and vehicle can actually provide. I think that the reason why it has not gotten to where we thought it could have been by now is because of us.
Bobby, if I had a drink in my hand, I would toast to you, my friend. that was on point. That is all I will say about that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't even think I have any comments, because what's floating around in my head just came out of your mouth. Yeah, I again could not agree with you more. I think, so many folks, so many startups and different companies in this industry are so passionate about this technology and what it can do. The biggest problem is getting in our own way, right?
Yes.
And not necessarily focusing on what is going to be best for the users or the industry that we're actually doing this for. It's so focused on, I think, what we want.
Yes.
And we
Yes.
have to get out of our own way in order for this to actually boom.
We have to, and I leave everybody with a Simon Sinek statement. And I think if we take this statement and we reevaluate our approach, it could be significant for everybody. And Simon Sinek made the statement that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it.
Yep.
And we're out here, we're pushing the what. This is what voice can do. This is what it can do. This is what it can do. But we're not talking really about the why and the experience. And if we focus on that, then everything else will take care of itself.
Yes, absolutely. I, again, could not agree more. And I think, the last question I usually ask is what is one thing that you think someone can do today to begin, leveraging voice or whatever technology we're talking about, either personally within their organization? I think everything that you just said over the last few minutes sum that up perfectly. Because I don't, sometimes I don't necessarily think it starts with the user. It's the job of those of us in this industry to help guide the user to understand why they need it, and the why has not been answered yet.
Exactly. There's a profound psychology to voice, and I think that if people that come to this industry, you really have to understand the psychological and sociological aspects to voice, and its impact and its engagement from the user to the device, and the device back to the user. And being able to empower the person to not only speak, but also type and text out their utterances. We have to really, really become obsessed with the user experience and the best way that they want, or the option to have the ability to alter the way they want the device to communicate to and with them. Mm-hmm. These are things that we have to think through. And whoever does that the best, whoever does that first, it's going to be groundbreaking for everybody else to witness. And DOSS's objective is to be that company.
I definitely think you're on the path to be that, Bobby, with everything we've talked about and your just mindset. I've interviewed so many different people throughout this industry. Everybody is great. So many incredibly intelligent, smart people. I will say though, your perspective is one I have not encountered before. And I connect with it so much because I feel like I've had this perspective for a while, but in many ways I feel restraint to actually speak up about it. And I think even talking with you in our chat here and just some different ways, I don't think I'm going to necessarily stay as quiet as I've been about it anymore. Because we need to get out of our own way. And the work needs to get done in order to really make this industry boom, because if it doesn't, God forbid this becomes just another gimmick technology. God forbid, right?
Exactly. And if we really look at it, people felt the same way about the internet. I can't help but laugh as I routinely watch Brian Gumbel talk about, what's this thing called the internet, as he was on live news,
Oh yeah.
And it's the same. It's a fad. It's, they said the same thing. And you know what? We have to understand it's just how humans are built and how humans are wired. But when we start talking about creating these transformative technologies that literally can alter the way we exist and do things, the task is yours to be understood. The challenge is ours to be able to deliver this digestible piece of genius and transformative technologies that we are expecting the average American to cognitively digest. It's just what are we thinking, that we're just going to create it and oh my gosh, they're just going to show up and love it? We have to create these specific use cases.
Yeah, I'm really starting to second guess that quote. If you build it, they will come, because I think that has proved to be the opposite more than the accurate in my time on this planet.
Exactly. And because you know what, again, being a student of this game, I remember hearing Jeff Bezos utter the statement that, you know what, because he said, I think the word disruption is overused. Technology doesn't disrupt people. We've created many disruptive, if you will, technologies, but the consumer didn't adopt it.
Right.
It's their behavior that disrupts things, not technology. It was a beautiful rendition of his insightful approach to the word disruption and human behavior and what it takes to evolve, and get people in the direction of a cutting edge new technology. What does that take? What does that process look like? And it's more educational than we give credit to. And then do we have the resources to train and alter these behaviors? And that's what we have to also think about in the voice community. It's more than just creating it and you got to go to Alexa and ask for this specific skill and for it to specifically open the name of this skill up, right? And I have to train them on maximizing this use case in order to make their lives easier. What does that look like?
Absolutely. Well, Bobby, this has been such a great conversation. I've left with so many different things to think about myself, and I love when I'm able to really connect with people I bring on the show, and it's just comforting to know that you're someone out there who kind of views this the way that I have. And I know there's other folks who definitely view it this way too. I think we got to start putting in the work and talking about it more. And again, to those of you listening, what Bobby and I are talking about here, we're not knocking Amazon. We're not knocking Google. We're not knocking any of the work that's already been done. We're just saying we've hit that apex point where the shift needs to happen to actually make it useful now. People are aware of it. People have used it at a high level. We have to make it useful. We have to give them that why.
Exactly.
Well, awesome. Well, Bobby, if anybody wanted to reach out to you or get in touch with you, what are some of the best ways for them to go about doing so?
I'm surely on LinkedIn. Look for my name, Bobby Bryant. Also on Twitter, at Real Bobby Bryant. If you want to email me directly, please do. We'd love to, engage in some meaningful dialogue about furthering the voice industry. That email is Bobby with a Y at askdoss.com. That's A as in apple, S as in Sam, K as in kite, D as in dog, Oscar, Sam.com. Would love to engage. I look forward to, working with the community, and I'm surely looking forward to launching DOSS on February 8th, 2021, as we go nationwide. And let's win together. Let's all help each other, and let me know how I can be a part of your solution as well.
Absolutely. Bobby, thanks so much again for taking the time. This has been an incredible conversation. I'm really excited to keep in touch and hopefully keep collaborating.
You got it. Thank you so much.
Artificial
Intelligence.
voice recognition, machine learning.
Robotics.
You've been listening to the Artificial Podcast with your host, Nick Myers.
Nick Myers.
To stay up to date with all our latest episodes, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and Google Podcasts. To learn more about how your organization can benefit by unlocking the power of AI and voice, visit www.redfox-ai.com. Until next time.